Hi, welcome everyone to the next episode of our summary of the Twitch stream, in which we're building a game that is inspired by a classic of mine, Deuteros, or classic favourite of mine, called Earth 2900, a browser-based game which is going to be MMO and is going to be built using Laravel and Vue. So in this summary, what we're looking at are three tests in particular that we worked on the last stream. So that's these three here. So what we'll do is go through each one and have a look at the code that's been generated. So let's have a look at the first one. Active item store test. So the idea behind the active item is that it starts off life as a static item in that it is created at a location ready to be picked up by a drone. So in that state, it's a static item. Now, we needed to just finish off this test because last time, although the rest of this test was here, we never actually confirmed that on the basis that if a static item is attached to a drone, it needs to confirm that actually there is one item on the drone to say that the static item has been attached. And we didn't confirm that last time, we just confirmed that the drone was fine. So we needed to add that. Then in this test, it says a static item cannot be attached to a drone if it's not at the same location. So let's have a look at the code that handles that. This is in our web file. So active item post. And you can see here that we've added an if statement into the code. And what we're saying is, if the drone's current location, which we've explained this one before, is not the same as the item's current location, then we simply return back to the show and no functionality occurs. Now, obviously, we could do it putting up some kind of notification to the player, a flash message or something, but at least the logic is correct in that it won't attach the item if they're not at the same place. So that works fine. We go back to the test. We then have a static item cannot be attached to a drone if the drone is at max capacity. So the concept of capacity hasn't really been dealt with in this game up to now. But the idea is that a drone can only carry one item, or certainly the drones that you get at the beginning can only carry about one item by default. So if you already have an item, the logic should say that you can't add any more items to it. So if, for example, we look here, the drone already has an active item. So this is already associated with the drone, and the drone's default capacity is 1. So now that we're trying to add another item, which is this one here, that's going to get posted. It should return that it just can't add it, and that's what it does. If we have a look at the web file, if the items count, if the drone's current items, so in this test case 1, is greater than or equal to its capacity, now its capacity is determined by a field in the database. So there we have capacity, which was added. And then in the model, we actually add a bit of functionality to allow for that to be altered by some future additions, augments or bonuses or whatever. But essentially, as it stands at the minute, it's simply returning the value of capacity from the database table. So the test is saying if the items, the number of items already is hit capacity, then we can't add any more and we simply return that back. And again, we'll need to provide some information for that. Okay, let's go back to our test. These pass fine, so we can move on to the next test. So the next test is the current trip. We need to be able to store that. So I think this was a to-do item last time, and essentially what we're saying is we can create the pending trip, as in we can create the destination where we want the drone to go by clicking on a map, clicking on an icon, and that is then the intended destination. But the drone still sat at its wherever it is. What we're saying now is that we can convert it into a current trip. In other words, we can simply say, go to the drone, and it sets off on its journey. So what we've put in the test is a drone here, a trip that's already been set. So technically this is a pending trip, but we don't have a model for that. So we'll just create it as a trip. We've assigned the trip to the drone already, but we've set the arrived at as null, which means it's not an active trip or not a current trip. So we send that ID up to the endpoint, which is current trips, which is what we're creating, a current trip. Let's have a look at the code. So let's see, where is current trip? Here we go. So current trips post. So the trip is we actually get the whole model of the trip that we've sent up for the ID that we've created for the current trip, for the pending trip, and we attach the drone to that and we get that model from the database. We then work out when it'll be that it will get there. We save that information and we return to the user. So because we've populated arrived at with a time, it now means that it's no longer a pending trip, it's a current trip. And eagle-eyed viewers of you will notice that to just simply add an hour, regardless of the trip distance, is definitely an arbitrary decision to pass the test. What it tells us is that we have more tests to do, and that's to do with the range. Now, you may have seen earlier when we looked at the migration and the model that I've already started putting stuff in for that. So we have the range here. I think actually we can look at that in the next test, which is a test we already had, but I think we've added to it. Yeah, so a trip can store if the drone can reach. Okay, so we've said, okay, we've created a drone with a trip and we've associated that to a specific location at 00, so that we know the origin of the trip. We've then created a to destination, which is exactly 100 kilometers or 100 meters away in this instance, because everything is in meters. We've then created a raw array that represents the trip from where the drone is to this location. And the idea is we have not set the drone range at this point. We're simply setting that if it does exceed the range, it can be added. So let's go to that. Oh, we've done it in 2 instances. Actually, no, we did do it, didn't we? Because I added this data. So this will run this test twice with these 2 parameters, 50 and 500. So the 50 gets brought in here as range. So now we're bringing in, oh yeah, no, I did set the range here to the drone. That's this one. So in instance 1, we set it to 50. We know the distance is 100 because we've set that. So we know that should fail. And the data says, yes, that should fail. We should get a false. On the long version, we've set the drone range to 500 and we've said that that should be true because the distance is only 100. And indeed, the tests pass. In fact, just to confirm, yeah, so the tests pass. So we know, in fact, have a look at how that works in the test. So this is the drone trip store test. So you can see there's the 2 permutations, we can say. Trip can be stored if the drone can reach with dataset short, which is this one, that's the name, and if the drone can reach the distance long. And we said, well, if it's short, it can't reach, so it will return false. If it's long, it can reach, so it will return true. Both of those tests pass. So we know that if the distance to travel is more than the range of the drone, we now know that the drone won't be able to select that as the intended destination. But it's quite obvious from our code here that this needs to change. So we need to add another test that will test a more, or not that it will test that it will work. The test itself is passes. What we need to test is that the correct arrived at is added to the trip. So that's going to be the subject of the next test. And that is it. They are the 3 tests that have driven the rest of the code in this in this last stream. So we're making good progress. We've still got a lot to do. And eventually, at some point, we do need to address the visual aspect of the whole game, which will come in once I'm happy that we've got the majority of the tests up and running. But if you want to see this in its full glory, please follow me on Twitch. The handle is at the beginning and end sheets of this video. I think there might be a link in the video description as well. And if you're just happy to watch these summaries, then please feel free to do so. Click the like and subscribe button if you want to see more of these. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.